Andrew Mills is the security architect at Real Self, which I was looking at the company and it seems well, my first takeaway was it's interesting, like the different fields that working in InfoSec can take you. Really any sort of company can needs the profession. So I'm sure he'll explain more about that. But essentially, he's talking about anonymity in visual images of yourself online. Essentially, I don't want to read the bio because I just copy and pasted it into the chat. I think he can explain better than I can. But in short, thank you so much, Andrew, for your time today. And you have the floor until for the next about 50 minutes. And if you want to do Q&A at any point, feel free to let me know, and I'll moderate that in the chat. And then thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending, for just being here. It is so awesome for you to be spending your time, enhancing your skills and coming together both to learn and to teach. And I just think that that is so important to our industry today. Thank you all for joining us for Mitigating Non-Consensual Algorithmic Victimization, FAWKES Go brrr. I really couldn't decide between like a DEF CON title or a Black Hat title, so I kind of split the difference with that one. You'll notice my video is currently off, and there's a reason for that. I actually am going to be doing a very short demo of showing you an evasion technique, a way for you to not be recognized by facial recognition. And if you know what I'm using, I will have an email address that you can send a message to. And if you send me the exact technology / thing that I'm using, you will win a prize in the form of a book that I will go ahead and buy and send you. I've got a list of my favorite InfoSec books. They're technical, they're non-technical, they're fiction, they're fun, they're Cory Doctorow stuff. So you can definitely just pick one and I will just buy it and send it to you because you deserve it, in my opinion. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to take a dive into a primer on facial recognition technology, its uses and users today, along with the threats posed by the current facial recognition technology landscape. Then we're going to look at methods of combating victimization against these privacy intrusions, including evasion and model poisoning. And then finally, with all the backstory, we're going to dive into our tool of choice, FAWKES. I'm going to have this presentation available with notes on my website, along with links to the sources and other helpful and related content. There's quite a lot of it that went into this. So what is this stuff on my face? If you can't see me, make sure you spotlight my videos so you can. But if you know what is on my face, and not just David Bowie makeup, send that to fawkes@millsymills.com. And I will, like I said, buy you a book and send it to you. This is a really fun evasion technique. It's about 10 years old, so it's kind of outdated, but it was a really, really cool project that was done a while ago that combated some facial recognition technologies that were publicly available during that time. But today it's very outdated and not really helpful, but it's still fun and a really interesting evasion technique. So I'll talk about it in a later slide. You should have plenty of information to Google it if you don't already know what it is. So let's try to click. That'll do it. Who am I? Who's this Mills guy? Why is he so freckled? Why is his hair like this? Is that a wig? No, it's not. Underneath all the Bowie makeup, I'm your standard certified ethical hacker, security plus security architect. I moved here in 2017 to join Real Self, where I was able to really move into security and start my career in earnest. I believe that security teams have a moral obligation to provide uncompromising protection of their users' data, both within the scope of security and privacy. Real Self has given me quite a lot of leeway in my pursuit of further protecting our user base. Our threat model for our users' privacy is a lot more nuanced than most online communities due to the subject matter that's covered. In some cultures, religions, and communities, having your real self activity exposed could lead to severe consequences. Real Self doesn't only have content and discussions around things like facelifts and Brazilian butt lifts. We have a lot of content and information around gender confirmation surgeries, reconstructive surgeries, and other procedures that aren't always well received depending on where people live. If it sounds like an interesting challenge to you, we're currently hiring director of product, UX design. We have some software dev positions for engineers and managers. So feel free to click through that link on this slide and definitely take a look at what we've got available. It's a very, very rewarding work, that's for sure. I'm also a big advocate for pangolins, so if you want to support this critically endangered animal, please visit my site and click through to my favorite nonprofits. I also speak a lot about trust and moral obligations in my internal talks at RealSelf, in reference to how we should go about our day-to-day business, and that's going to be a big theme in this talk as well. You can also see my personal site and my Twitter account there if you want to see me shout memes into the void. So we'll go over a quick primer on facial recognition, and this is actually an image that was created by the Iowa Department of Transportation that kind of showed how their facial recognition system works to detect fraud in DMV work. So you can basically see how you take an image, you isolate just the face, and then you basically outline the landmarks of each individual point, nose, eyebrows, jaw, mouth. And then all of that data is compiled with a bunch of other data in order to make educated guesses on whether or not two images have the same person in them. So at a broad level, a lot of these facial recognition systems have similar methods of operation. The systems are going to gather samples either consensually, like when images are proactively supplied by someone for the express use of facial recognition research, or non-consensually, like when Clearview AI is allowed to access vast troves of government data from over 600 law enforcement agencies that it regularly shares with private security companies, or like when they scrape the public internet for over 3 billion images and start ingesting those into their model and using them against people's will. Once a sample is gathered, it's analyzed for its usability within the model. If an image has no faces, obscured faces, if the image quality is too low, or if it's overexposed, they label the sample as unhelpful and it's disposed of. Sometimes only the usable portion of the image is retained while the unnecessary sections are removed, like in that DMV image. We saw that it just isolated the face because in reality, it doesn't care about the blue background or anything else. It just wants this because that's what provides the landmarks that are important. The samples are analyzed for those landmarks. The measurements are taken for future probability calculation. Models might be created with the intention of identifying an individual person or locating an individual person. Sometimes they'll also be deployed against large groups, depending on the author's objectives. Results may include false positives, false negatives, and calculated probability matches of the remaining samples. There's a huge asterisk associated with this entire slide, and it's that pretty much all of these models are closed source and their nuances differ in ways that we really cannot conclude externally, which makes them a lot more difficult to analyze for weaknesses and bias. So how is it actually in use today? Who are the major players and what are they doing with this technology? So there's the big one, Clearview AI. They made headlines for just about everything you can think of. The big ones being they've worked closely with over 600 law enforcement agencies in the US and 2,400 worldwide. They scraped the public internet for 3 billion plus images, which they got a lot of bad publicity for. They got cease and desist orders from YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook. Their CEO was quoted as saying, "It's an honor to be at the center of the debate now and talk about privacy," which is absolutely laughable that they would even care about being a part of that conversation. Rihanna Pfefferkorn is the Associate Director of Surveillance and Cybersecurity at the Stanford Center for Internet and Society. She wrote, "A lot of data about individuals can quickly become stale and thus low value by those seeking to monetize it. Jobs, salaries, addresses, phone numbers, those all change, but photos are different. Your face does not go stale." And that is absolutely right. One of my friends is a teacher at a private school. And to be accepted into that private school, your elementary school age child, you actually have to, as the parent, sign a release that allows the school to use your child's image in all marketing, publicity, whatever they want to do with your child's image, they can do. And there are no protections in there against protecting their facial data. So you have children, teenagers, people whose faces are going to stay roughly the same and be recognizable to facial recognition systems for decades. Their parents are the ones signing it over before they can even get a learner's permit. It's another way, it's similar to DNA companies, people submitting their child's DNA for Ancestry.org analysis and not realizing that they're really non-consensually just signing away their kids' DNA rights. Cory Doctorow said that Clearview AI is a creepy, grifty, privacy-invading toolsmith serving authoritarians, and I love that quote. I'm not going to explicitly state that Clearview has some extremely problematic associations with hate groups, but I would encourage you to explore their Wikipedia page under the connected individuals section and see if that raises any flags for you. There's also a lot of examples of facial recognition technology companies mishandling sensitive data, ignoring data collection laws, and actively fighting the cries of the privacy community, and we're going to get into those threats shortly. Individuals are also capable of rolling out their own facial recognition technology. Python, AWS, and other cloud-based scientific analysis providers are readily available for spin-up. Consumer products are even getting a lot of facial recognition tech at a very high rate. NVIDIA, Amazon, and Microsoft are only a few examples of consumer-offered facial recognition technology. Obviously, your phone has facial recognition. It's different in that it doesn't use visual data, but actually more infrared depth perception, which is a totally different form of facial recognition than what we're talking about here. However, you do see in consumer products like personal home security systems and cameras, even Ring doorbells that can do facial recognition detection and figure out whether or not a person at the door is someone that should be allowed in, which is again pretty crazy that people are just putting that in their homes and not knowing that all the data that's being taken in by those products is also property of the original manufacturer and not you, the consumer. So there's a lot to unpack in those examples, but is this just a problem because there's a few bad actors? Why should we care about facial recognition technology as a whole? You should only be worried if you're doing something wrong, right? Well, there's quite a few threats to using facial recognition in this manner. Buckle up because I'm going to be on the slide for a bit and I might get salty about it. Bias is enormous. Perpetuating existing skin tone biases, gender, ethnic, sexual biases is rampant in facial recognition technology. Joy Buotamwini, who's a researcher at the MIT Media Lab, she found that models by Microsoft, IBM, and Face++ had these error rates. For lighter skinned males like me, up to 1%. The maximum error rate on lighter skinned males is 1%. Lighter skinned females, 7%, darker skinned males, 12%, darker skinned females, 35%. Joy also heads up the Algorithmic Justice League, which is, aside from being the coolest nonprofit name I've ever heard, it's a nonprofit that works to make AI equitable and accountable. There's a multitude of studies over the last 10 years that show unequivocally and inarguably that biases existing in development teams are directly translated into biases of AI and machine learning models. Machine learning models in France better understood Caucasian faces, while models that were developed in areas of Caucasian minority performed better at recognizing the ethnic majority of the region. These biases are typically unconscious and have significant impact on the overall model accuracy and reliability. Human review is often brought up as a saving grace of facial recognition. Like, yes, it has all this bias. Yes, it has these error rates. Yes, it has these problems. But if we implement a human that comes in and does case-by-case reviews of negatives and positives, then we can reduce that error rate, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, if you have any unskilled, untrained human review process, it is worse than having a normal non-human reviewed process because humans, when they are untrained and not actually facial recognition trained experts, then they are not going to do a good job at human review. There is an FBI document that backs this up, but I wasn't able to find an unpaywalled version, so I couldn't directly link to it. I'm going to see if I can find it and I'll tweet that at some point. Speech suppression, absolutely huge. I encourage you all to check out perpetuallineup.org. It allows you to look up your local jurisdiction and see how law enforcement agencies in your area utilize facial recognition. In Seattle, for instance, Seattle PD can search mugshots, but they need reasonable suspicion to run a search. South Sound 911 actually sought real-time facial recognition capabilities, but the Seattle Police Department banned its use. Yay, which is shocking because it's the Seattle Police Department. A FAQ for the system that's actually used by Seattle for facial recognition says, quote, It does not see race, sex, orientation, or age, which contradicts a 2012 FBI co-authored study and does not reflect the facts that minorities are not only likely overrepresented in the system, they're definitely overrepresented in the system. In King County, for example, Blacks are arrested at a rate 294% higher than their share of the population, not just of the population itself. So that's actually going to have a major impact on whose faces are in those models and who they're trained on. Geophedia is another AI machine learning facial recognition combination company. They actually put out a marketing case study document that referenced their part in protecting Baltimore citizens and property from violent rioters that were protesting in response to the murder of Freddie Gray. I've got a scanned copy in the notes that'll be available to you, but it's straight up out of like a Cory Doctorow dystopian end of the world book. There's a quote that says, on their document, it says, quote, using Geophedia's real-time location-based social media monitoring, Vaccaro's team, which is the Baltimore PD's crime intelligence unit, was able to heighten officers' situational awareness and help them stay one step ahead of the rioters. In some cases, police officers were able to run social media photos through facial recognition technology to discover rioters with outstanding warrants and arrest them directly from the crowd. There's no mention in their document of what, if anything, was done to warrant the mass scanning of all the people at this protest. Also note that according to their documentation, all protesters are rioters, so everyone being there was already a criminal and subject to arrest. There's no mention of what's going to be done with all the data that was collected on those who were not arrested. There's no transparency, and there's no use policies available for their technology. If you couple that with the existing implicit bias in these modeling systems and the lack of effective human review, would you individual, would you go exercise your constitutional right to protest if you knew that police were using facial recognition technology to arrest protesters and that facial recognition technology had a 35% error rate on the ethnic and gender categories that you fall into? Hell no, your speech is absolutely suppressed from that point. There's no way you're going out there because you know that it's going to be used against you. There's an enormous lack of oversight protections as well. There's very few organizations using facial recognition that have publicly available use policies. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, has rejected in extremely strong terms the Customs and Border Patrol plan to implement biometric entry and exit scanning. There's currently no legislation on the table to address this nationwide. And then who should be controlling all of this, public or private sector? Private organizations are creating and selling access to huge image databases and algorithms. The government's contracting with non-government organizations because they can defer responsibility in that way. They're not violating privacy laws because the government has restrictions on what it can do. It's these private organizations and the government just contracts through them. So who's monitoring all the decisions that are made by these AI and machine learning models in government systems? Who's reviewing the model to make sure that no biases are causing, for instance, people to be denied access to subsidized housing? There's a really good book that addresses this subject and dives deeply into several models that were in government use at the time, and it clearly shows discrepancies in decisions made by the models. The book is called Automating Inequality by Virginia Eubanks. She did a ton of legwork, had some great personal connections to the subject, and I highly recommend reading it. It's kind of what started me down this road of this entire talk. And again, I'm going to bring up again in a bigger point, lack of legislative protections. There's a few things on the docket right now. I know that there's a bill in the Senate for algorithmic basically making algorithms available for public review when they're going to be used in government. And I think that's just currently stalled. But as far as local protections go, California has a 3-year moratorium on using facial recognition tech on police body cams. That took effect January 2020. San Francisco banned facial recognition use by city agencies, including police. Somerville, Massachusetts did the same thing. And then Oakland did the same, banning city use of facial recognition, but they actually went a step further and included whistleblower protections and prohibiting NDAs related to facial recognition tech. So there's some very small wins going on, but in reality, we need something way more overarching and protective. So that's a ton of reasons to not trust the current landscape, but what do we do to keep ourselves safe? What can we do to protect our users? Probably the most important question is going to be for you to ask yourself, what are my users most at risk of? And how can I protect them from that while not breaking our entire business? The security department is often seen as the department of no, the department you go to get rejected and you know, smacked because you wanted to do something new and different and they said no. That's not really the way things should operate. You need to support the business, but you also need to be the advocate for your users and make sure that you have a good understanding of your users' threat model and how to protect them. At Real Self, we really care about having visually unperturbed images since we're dealing with facilitating honest conversations about aesthetic procedures, the recovery process involved, extent of scarring and effectiveness. So we can't implement anything that perturbs the image so much that a human would be able to detect it. But we still want to protect our users from non-consensual scraping. So keeping that in mind, you need to have what's best for your organization in mind and what's best for your users. That might not be the same as the solution that we came to. So to that end, I'm going to cover a few basic anti-facial recognition technology tactics that we can use. Evasion, just like this, is pretty self-explanatory. The objective is to evade detection. This can be accomplished through makeup, hats, hairstyles, which, while obvious, they will reduce the likelihood of positive identification. What I'm doing right here, I haven't checked my email, so I don't know if anyone's got it yet. I'm using CV Dazzle, which was developed about 10 years ago between some, I believe it was some fashion designers, mathematicians, computer scientists. They're like, how can we make some really cool, edgy, crazy fashion choices that also break facial recognition tech? Again, it's about 10 years old, totally outdated. With Evasion, it's really difficult to do anything effective because if you're dealing with a black box model where you don't know the facial recognition tech and how it's working and you're not able to feed it information and get results, we have no idea how effective these evasion tactics are going to be. Same thing goes if there's multiple models in use. Your tactic might be effective against one model, but if it's not effective against another one that's in use, then you're kind of out of luck. Clean label poisoning attacks include correctly labeled training samples that have perturbed, cloaked, or obfuscated content. This causes the model to train on that perturbed image, which drives the model towards inaccuracy. Unfortunately, clean label attacks are only really effective on the pre-selected image, and they're typically easily detected and ignored in the wild. Model corruption attacks, however, are similar to clean label, but they intend to propagate so many poisoned images into the model that the source of sampling is no longer viable and it's abandoned. For example, it's pretty much your site makes it so hard for us to scrape faces, we're just going to ignore it and go away from you, which is great for your organization because then boom, you're safe, or your users are more safe, but it doesn't really do anything to address the problem at a whole. So that'll lead us to the utility of the hour, FAWKES. FAWKES was developed by the Sand Lab at the University of Chicago. FAWKES makes algorithmic pixel level changes that, while imperceptible to the human eye in most cases, it actively poisons the machine learning model of any facial recognition system that has ingested that cloaked image. FAWKES has desktop apps for Windows and Mac OS. It's got binaries for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And FAWKES originally, if you actually read the documentation, it's intended for individual use, but we wanted to adapt it for use in cloud infrastructure so that other organizations could leverage its benefits and hopefully be able to deploy it fairly easily. See a few chats coming in, so I'm just gonna check that. Okay, perfect. So I want to make sure I'm up to date. Thank you everyone for your participation. I like the links, this is great. Well, this was a wild project. Originally, we wanted our FAWKES solution to have a few important qualities. It had to not perturb the image so that a human could see. That obviously is top priority for us. And it should be easily deployable to other organizations. Lambdas seem to be the best way to go. If you're not familiar with AWS Lambda, it is essentially a single function cloud formation deployed AWS processor. Essentially, you can upload your whatever code you want based on the language you're going to be using. You set up input and output and triggers, and you can basically tell it every time I upload a photo to this S3 bucket, every time I upload that, it's going to grab that photo, run this Lambda command based on that photo, and then output it to whatever. Lambdas do have their limitations though. They're really, really fast and they're really, really powerful. And I think that they're going to be around for a really long time because of how efficient they are. But they have a lot of limitations on size and performance. There's a hard limit on the unzipped Lambda code, dependencies, layers, source, and result files. Your entire Lambda unpackaged and running has to be less than 250 megabytes. Usually not a big deal. But in FAWKES, once we actually pulled out the FAWKES binaries, pulled out the dependencies, and started building a serverless configuration for it, just one of the dependencies had a single folder that was 370 megs. It was unbelievably huge. So the entire unpackaged with dependencies FAWKES binary is like almost 900 megs, which is shockingly large. We even went at it with a scalpel. We were slicing out packages and trying to remove as much disk space as possible. We were able to get it to successfully deploy, but anytime we sent anything to it and it actually started to unpackage a few of the dependencies and run, it just immediately filled up on storage and died. So that didn't work. There's some more complicated deployment scenarios we could have gone with, like doing a Docker build or passing the job to an EC2 instance, but those are a lot more involved than what we envisioned. We wanted something that was literally a single YAML deployment file for a serverless framework and just be able to take that, pop it in a directory, hit deploy, and should be good to go. That's what we wanted, and we weren't able to get there. The good news is we're still working on it. There's still a lot of stuff that we're playing around with. And I think that we're going to be able to find a solution that should be fairly easily scalable and easy to distribute to people. We have, like I said, Lambda's really popular. They're here to stay. Also, we're not the only ones working on this problem. There's a large community of scientific AI and machine learning users that want to use Lambdas for their work, but the Python dependencies are just purely too large. I was up late last night and I found someone had hacked together a 15 megabyte Lambda layer that probably, I think, in our Lambda deployment is about 200 megs on its own. So if we can get that in there and free up 175 megs, we might be okay. So we're going to continue working on this and see if we can get something that will deploy properly and be scalable for all organizations. The good news about using the serverless framework is it works on Google Cloud Platform, works on AWS, works in Heroku, and a bunch of other cloud providers. On top of that, I'm also working on a few Lambdas that will actually utilize Amazon's recognition system. This will allow us to do comparisons between FAWKES cloaked images and the original file, so we can actually get some measurable, just some measurements around what is actually, how effective it is. Basically, we're looking for at effectiveness. There we go. So other than the challenges that we put on ourselves in the way of FAWKES and trying to get everything to run properly, what kind of challenges are we going to run into when we actually get FAWKES running in our environment? We weren't able to answer these questions 100% because we didn't want to assume that FAWKES running locally is going to behave the same as FAWKES running in a Lambda. So first off is accessibility. For those not aware, Google cares a lot about things when choosing what order search results should be displayed in. Site load performance, content quality, safe for work, not safe for work images, those are all taken into account. Accessibility is also a part of that. Chrome specifically uses facial recognition to add alt text to images for visually impaired users. So what experience are these users going to have when they're interacting with FAWKES cloaked images versus the originals? Is that going to affect the search rankings? Is that going to get us delisted from Google entirely? That's a huge, huge concern. And what do we need to care about regarding image properties? Do we have some image types that have more obvious perturbation than others? What about megapixel count, file size, filters, DSLRs versus phone pictures versus scanned images? Is there going to be a difference between the behavior of all of these various different photos and how they interact with FAWKES? And finally, cost. Lambdas are really cost effective due to how they function, but how much would it cost per image to process? For instance, 1 million photos at 1 megabyte each, or 500 photos at 10 megabytes each. Scale matters, and cost scaling can be really important to your organization. Remember, these challenges may or may not matter to your org or users. I'm well aware of my own implicit biases, and I know that a diverse group like this is going to find a lot of challenges, a lot more challenges that were apparent to me. So before I hop into the demo, I did want to address some next steps. So from an organizational point of view, what should you do in order to protect your users' privacy, especially against this non-consensual scraping? Well, as an organization, you need to be aware that your users are at risk all the time from everywhere. It is your job as the security whatever to know these threats and actively build defenses that are crafted to your threat model and your user's threat model. Not my threat model, not Kevin Mitnick's model, not some Twitter cyber influencer's model. Your users, your threat model, your responsibility. Be like Tron and fight for the users. At Real Self, I hammer it into the culture that privacy and security at the start of every discussion. Every time we use user data in a new way, if we collect new user data, explore a business relationship, or brainstorm a new product idea, we have to ask how this is going to affect user trust, user privacy, and user security. As individuals, this is a really hard fight. If you look at the problem, it's very similar to the environmental problems and their causes. Very similar landscape. You have these huge, wealthy, powerful, unregulated private entities that have the resources to do way more damage than an individual can mitigate. Yeah, I can recycle, I can compost, and I can run my photos through FAWKES before posting them to Twitter. But when some huge oil company has an enormous environmental accident, when some energy companies just dumping pollution and there's no government regulation on it, and there's really no steps that they can take to mitigate it, my recycling is not going to help the situation. They need to stop dumping hundreds of gallons of pollutants into lake, river, stream, whatever. And it goes the same with when a government organization gives a private facial recognition technology company access to DMV photos, or when they just non-consensually scrape billions of images from the internet. I can't stop that from happening. Other people need to take action. So we need to be raising a lot of awareness around this issue. We need to tell our representatives that this is something that we care about and that they need to act on. We need to petition our organizations to take user privacy seriously and to implement protections for everyone, not just those who have the resources to care about privacy. Privacy is a rich people problem is a topic for a whole separate talk, so I'm not going to get into it now, but it is absolutely true. So let's just take a quick look. I'm going to minimize my presentation in a sec here, but I did just want to take you through a few photos, some that had been perturbed and some that did not. I actually grabbed just random headshots from the VetSec website. So here's one of my headshots. Which one's perturbed, which one's not? Seeing it on a big 1440p screen right in front of me, I can see differences. But they are definitely not, deal breakers. That's for sure. I can post this on Twitter. I can post it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and not really worry about people saying, "Oh, why that looks kind of weird. What happened to your face? Why is it rumply?" Same thing here. This actually had FAWKES detected 3 different faces in this image. One obviously in the foreground, one in the beanbag chair behind him, and one far in the back behind that laptop. And it went ahead and cloaked all 3 of them. The original is on the, it's hard to say. The original is on the left-hand side. The perturbed one should be on the right-hand side, but they're very, very similar. I think you can kind of see like some lines on the side of his cheek. Keeping in mind too, that the images that I ran through this were wildly different sizes. This one was like a 5 megabyte photo. This one was like 300 kilobytes. It was drastically different size and drastically different quality. Same here, original on the left, perturbed version on the right-hand side, and you can kind of see that some of the facial stuff is just a little, the shading's a little weird and a little off. Again, I think this was like a 75 kilobyte file. I tried to do like the smallest file possible that I had access to see how bad I could make it. But it really was not horrendously bad. And even this one for John, big shout out to John who reached out to me when VetSec was looking for another speaker. So I had to put him in here full screen. Original on the left, perturbed on the right, and yeah, again, some shading things, but nothing crazy. And again, tiny, tiny, tiny image. I think this was like 100 kilobytes. It's really small, very, very different than what you would get if you had a higher quality shot, you know, straight from an iPhone, full image size. All right, so I'm just gonna kill my video real quick because I gotta get right up on it. My Yeti fell, sorry about that. Okay, how much time we got? Oh, wow, I blew through this presentation. That's great.
Yeah, you got some time.
Got plenty of time. Just gonna drop that down. Hey, one pass, cool update. Great, so I've actually got some test data in here. I should have organized everything better, but I didn't, so that's the way it goes. Some of these took quite a long time to run. I actually tried to run this in, I tried to run the binary, and I tried to run every single mode that was made available. And then we also do have the FAWKES GUI, which takes several minutes to load, unfortunately. The binary is faster, definitely. Perfect. So let's open up all these bad boys. Boom, boom, boom. Perfect. All right. So original on the right here. This one's actually one of the low mode cloaks. Minimum cloak, and then medium cloak. And you can definitely see a little perturbation around the eyebrows, a little bit of blurriness, noticeable, but again, very, very, very hard to tell unless you're looking at it on a big high-res screen. And you can also see this was the, I ran this command, the FAWKES, just on the test directory with the minimum mode. It found 3 faces in one image, 1 face in the rest of them, and then immediately starts batch processing them. Each one of these took like maybe 20 seconds to do at a fairly low rate of speed. 700 seconds, 760 seconds total protection cost. And you can see we go up from 762 protection cost to, oh, here we go, here's low. 1057, and then we went up to medium. Or that actually, I think this should be, yeah, this should be medium at 4100 seconds. So you are seeing some pretty big differences when you're actually running the binary. Let's go ahead and give you a test run now. So with the FAWKES binary, it's really unfortunate. It needs to, honestly, a lot of cleaning up. And I will try to do that as much as I can and post things, but it can, at this time, it only does directories. It does not do single files. So if you want to write a script that will do individual files for you, you're going to have to implement some fun directory creations and deletions. Hit enter, and it will just take some time to spin up. Like I said, all those dependencies loading into RAM, all those dependencies getting called by Python before it even starts processing it. It just takes like 30 seconds or so for everything to spin up. You can use the FAWKES binary here at the same time, pop into our desktop, grab a test image. And it's kind of nice too, because if you try to process an already cloaked image, it won't even detect the face on it. So that will actually error out shortly, letting us know there's no faces detected in the images. This guy's still spinning out. I wanted to see how big this one was. This was like, you can see also the file size increases pretty exponentially as well once you actually run these through FAWKES. So we have yada, 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 392, 392, 392, 46. So which one's the original? It's probably this one because it's unbelievably tiny. So you are going to see some disk-based use changes as well. If you're implementing this and you've got S3 buckets, you're paying for your storage. Definitely something to keep in mind if that's something that is worrisome, because you are looking at an increase of about 8x, give or take, on the file size alone. And yep, FAWKES binary is still running, still just finding those faces, and it'll eventually start running. Perfect. So that's most of what I have from a demo point of view. I just wanted to kind of give you some visuals on exactly how this processes. The binary and the executable, they all run the same in that they will drop the cloaked images in the same file, or I'm sorry, rather in the same directory that the originals were taken out of, and it will go ahead and toss some additional data at the end of the file name to let you know what kind, that it was cloaked, and then to what level was the file cloaked. So yeah, that's what I've got. I'd love to open it up for Q&A if you want to facilitate that, Jack.
Yeah, you got it. That's man, fascinating talk. Yeah, but so Q&A, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, and I will moderate from there. And the by far the most interesting presenter presenter approach. I love it. This is the way I do InfoSec cons. And if not, I definitely have some questions. So anyone, any questions at all, feel free to jump in. Let's see. All right. So, actually, John wants his face back, please. Yeah, it's
and ingested. It is part of the model now, and you can never have it back.
So Michael Smith is wondering, can this be used in video instead of stills?
Not as of yet. As far as I'm aware of, it's currently only compatible with images, but because I am aware of like Amazon Recognition has video plugins. There's a lot that you can do with that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, right now, I'm not aware of anything that can do this on a video level. And I think that the barrier for implementing something like that would be really high for a cloud-based system, that's for sure. And that would be something that would take quite a lot of juice to run.
Right. So I guess for videos, the challenge is just the data size, essentially, right? Because, I mean, ultimately, it's just frames.
Yeah, I mean, it is just frames, and you're right. It would mostly be that size. I don't know enough about basically doing Python video analysis, at least not yet. We'll see what my next talk is.
All right. So Ian Murphy, who's from the UK, says the Portland ban seems to have ignored all those home video doorbells doing facial rec. How do we get people to keep their scans to their property and not to public space? I walk around, I live in Cambridge, Mass, and I walk around, I see these things everywhere. So that's an interesting question.
Absolutely, that's a great question. I see them around here all the time. I mean, I'm in Seattle. It's Amazon's here.
Yeah.
the rings are all over the place. And the ring question is particularly concerning because that is an area that we have seen as law enforcement agencies sponsoring in the way of providing discounted ring hardware to homeowners, pretty much. And then, finding on the back end that Amazon and the law enforcement agency were having data sharing agreements and having this and that. So it's being pushed heavily by organizations. What can we do to stop it is we can not be customers of them. With coronavirus, we can wear masks when we're outside that hide our face enough so that we won't get pinged too much for that.
Sure.
But realistically, there needs to be legislation, there needs to be regulation in this world for facial recognition tech. It's just purely extremely dangerous to have in an unregulated way, especially when you have organizations like law enforcement that's proactively propagating it.
Yeah, Ian Murphy says we also have police in parts of the UK asking people to send them images that they collect for crime fighting. Yeah, intense.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's funny because the UK, the surveillance mentality and privacy mentality in the UK is very different than what we experience here in the US. Here, we have city-controlled surveillance cameras, traffic cameras, and stuff that's around, but it's not anywhere near the level that you see in, for instance, downtown London, where on a street corner you just see like 30 security cameras on one pole pointed in every which direction.
Sure.
It doesn't seem to have been such a big deal over there, at least not yet. However, as Americans, we're just used to a little bit more of, waving that privacy and freedom flag. So I think we get more of a cultural pushback from that, but we still have a lot of inaction on the legislative side. So I think that just overall worldwide, there needs to be, facial recognition legislation and a little bit of regulation on that side, but also nationwide within each nation, we need to really assess what we're comfortable with from the public point of view and what we need to do to keep each other safe.
Let's see. Well, Michael Smith has a comment. People in Singapore complain. He has a background in living in Singapore. People in Singapore complain to the government because they didn't put a video camera outside their house. So a question I have would be, so in terms of your work with Real Self and then using FAWKES, is this something you guys are using in production? And if so, like, how did you get that sold to, a business use, or what were the drawbacks from being able to use it, et cetera?
Yeah, we don't have it running yet. We really want to get it to a place that's able to repeatedly scale and be deployed by different organizations with different infrastructures. So we want to make it really accessible. What we've tried to stray away from is building it just so that it works in our environment. We really want something that we can just lift and copy and paste so that other people can use it as well. So we don't quite have it in production yet. Really, all of this came around when I did an executive security awareness training, and we were addressing user privacy and user trust and talking about ways that we can elicit more trust from our users. And I outlined a lot of ways that there is there's constant threat, and the current landscape around privacy, it's so marketable right now. Like it really actually should be pretty easy to sell privacy to organizations and executives if you have public products and if you care about public perception. If you look at Apple and their ad campaigns over the last 18 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
They are so focused on privacy. I mean, when the new iOS came out and you can do the sign in with Apple, hide my email, and it just pops up email forwarders, and just so that third party never sees your real email address. Like, that is the kind of organizational, institutional change that needs to be made across a lot of places.
Got it. Let's one question. Well, two questions from Ian. Looks like we got about another 5 minutes here. Well, we can actually go up to time zone change, but we can go for the next 9 minutes, depending on your availability, if you want to keep answering questions. All right, right on. So from Ian, can we ever remove the bias from facial rec? The NIST report, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, I think. Anyways, the NIST report suggests that even high-def cameras are a complete fail, which suggests more than just training set issues. And then Jolene asked, do kids' faces really not change enough in 10 years to avoid facial recognition? That surprised her.
Yeah, so Ian, great question regarding whether or not is the question, is the problem the algorithms or is the problem the cameras? I think that there's definitely shortcomings in current video technology. I need to read that report. I haven't heard of it, so I'm definitely going to dive into that and see what I can find. The model and the bias it's coming from it, I think that it can be removed, but the only way that it can be removed is through things like public review, especially when you're talking about AI, facial recognition, and models that are running in government capacities that are making decisions on things like I mentioned earlier, like benefits and subsidized housing. There is just an enormous amount of bias potential there, and the only way to really get it out in the open is to make these algorithms and models public, so that experts can review it, and not just the experts that are hired by the government or private organization, but real industry experts that can ask questions that will get the right answers.
Sure. Yeah, right on.
Yeah, it's definitely an imaging problem. It's a coding and diversity problem, and it's a privacy problem. It's honestly a huge snowball of a ton of issues all in one horrible ball.
And then Jolene's question was really fascinating. Do kids' faces really not change enough to avoid facial rec?
Yeah, I would probably, I need to look at the actual hard data for that. I know that for older children, basically when I'm thinking of non-consensual, or basically consent issues when it comes to facial recognition technology, anyone under 18, you know, it should not be able to have someone consent for them, especially for something that is potentially permanent. I definitely know that, you know, some people are going to change more drastically than others, but a lot of facial structures, bone structures are going to be fairly locked in by the late teens. You will, however, see, you know, obviously I work for real self, so aesthetic procedures could definitely cause some changes there as well. Though I doubt that any of them are going to be so drastically different mathematically that they would be
Yeah. This starts to sound like a Minority Report with the, remember that Tom Cruise movie?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally what I felt like when I was just reading through automating inequality, because just reading through, and then I looked at the Algorithmic Justice League and just all the data that they had, and I'm just like, I cannot imagine deploying anything with this high of an error rate in at work. Like, how could I in good conscience deploy something with a 35% error rate? That's shocking.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, it's you wonder how much of that is selling good sales teams to governments that want tech. It's hard to say. All right, not to make this about our conversation. Let's get some questions from Brad. This is a pretty cool take. I'm guessing this would be more of a problem on larger corporate networks, etc. But with the modification of the files, do you see any issues with the modification triggering a false positive for some sort of data hiding?
That's a good question. I do know that there are some automated systems that will catch things like if you've done like oh gosh, stenography or scanography.
Yeah, Skenography. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're trying to, you know, input hidden data into an image and then upload it, there's a lot of yeah, stenography. Perfect.
Skenography. Wow, I was missing a G. Neither of us got it.
Yeah, when you have, you definitely can have some stuff that's going to check that. I haven't seen any anything get triggered, because I did run a few things in production and I did kind of move some of these cloaked images around. I never saw anything that jumped out, but it's definitely a great idea to do a steg detect on that. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Let's see. All right, so what next? Ian Murphy asks, have you looked at the Gender Shades project? And if so, what is that?
Let me see. It might have been something I scrolled past. Oh, this is from Algorithmic Justice League. Okay. I think I have this bookmarked, but I didn't get to it, so I didn't have a chance to put it in my presentation. Oh, but this is great stuff.
All right, plus $5 Digibucks to Ian Murphy for that one.
Yes, thank you, Ian. That's great. I'm going to use that.
So I have a question then. My take on this field is that a frustrating aspect is that a lot of this tech is open sourced, and you know, it's kind of the opposite side of the coin of FAWKES, that a lot of the recognition tech, I remember even one of the initial contact tracing platforms came from MIT and it was open sourced. So like how does that, how do you work with that mindset, and that, you know, not to be too dramatic, but like, you know, 60 years ago, they're open sourcing the Manhattan Project essentially in terms of what's the field like in that area?
Yeah, there's honestly the amount of pitfalls are just insane.
Yeah.
And there's just we have the tools are open source. The models, the algorithms, the actual systems that are making decisions, those are the ones that are not. The algorithms that are making these decisions and that are pushing the entire model towards inaccuracy or bias.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, of course. Okay.
Those are the ones that we're unable to actually get access to and research. So, you know, we've got the tools. We can use the tools. We can use the tools to create adversarial AIs. We can use the tools to create things that will automatically try to poison images or try to throw off algorithms, but without actually being able to push an input to a model and then receive an output from it so that we can see what effect it's had, it's very difficult to fight those black boxes.
Got it. Okay, so last couple minutes here. What's two things? First, what is the pangolin? This is your chance for some advocacy, and then what's next for you? Like, where are you taking your career?
Man, pangolins are the coolest animals. They're critically endangered. They're on 2 or 3 continents, if I remember correctly. They're primarily poached for use in medicine. Their scales are made of keratin, just like your fingernails, but people like to grind them up and use them for all kinds of crazy stuff. So, really awesome animal. If you're a big pangolin fan, content warning on the South Park quarantine episode, that was a struggle for me. They're just awesome animals. I got to meet one in San Diego back in the day, and they were just so cool. So definitely hop on my website, go to causes, and I've got a few nonprofits there that you can click through that supports Pangolin Conservancy. They're just so cool.
Right on.
Yeah, as far as my career, I'm just really excited to be working to help people. I just want to know that my work has an impact and that I'm able to really provide something for the community. So I'm really excited to do more talks. I'm really excited to do more work to make open source and make public and to help people on that end. So I'm really, really happy to be here and excited for what the future holds.